I'm Michael V, and this is Arcade Guts. In the 80s and 90s, arcades were still a pretty big deal, and the goal of many video game manufacturers was to bring the arcade experience home. We can see this in the basic design of the Atari 2600 controller and the games released for the consoles of the day. One of the strategies video game companies had to bring the arcade experience home was to create arcade sticks. These were basic controllers that could be hooked up to your video game console that would attempt to emulate the controls on an actual arcade machine. The most famous of which being the NES Advantage, made by Nintendo in the late 80s. This controller featured turbo buttons, slow motion control, and an 80s style joystick. So after playing an assortment of both arcade and NES classics with the NES Advantage, I've come to my conclusion about this controller. When it really comes down to it, the NES Advantage has its good sides and its bad sides. However, all of its advantages come from it being a turbo controller, and all of its disadvantages come from it attempting to be an arcade stick. See, its buttons are comfortable enough, but they pale in comparison to the actual buttons in an arcade machine, and the joystick is clearly not designed to the standards of a 80s style joystick. So, as a unique controller, the NES Advantage succeeds on many levels, but if this was intended to bring the arcade experience home, then I just have to say that it really failed to impress. Nonetheless, the NES Advantage was a fairly successful arcade stick that is still popular to this day. However, in the 90s, one video game genre seemed to reign supreme above all others, and that was fighting games. Man, fighting games were bigger, had more buttons, and required more precision in the controls. Seeing how most fighting games got their start in the arcade, it only seemed logical to make an arcade stick to play these titles at home. One such stick was the Super Advantage, made by ASCIIWare. This arcade stick was influenced heavily by the NES Advantage, going as far as using the same button and joystick type as the original. It had turbo controls for each button and a slow motion function. However, the most important aspect of this controller was it had enough buttons to play fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Now, just like the NES Advantage, I went ahead and I played a large assortment of games with a Super Advantage to truly test out its abilities as an arcade stick.
And I must say that... Where do you keep the milk? Where is the milk, Michael V? Michael V, I need milk. Where do you keep the milk?
General Agnew, was that you?
Michael V, what are you doing? What sort of dorky stuff are you doing today?
Hey, everybody, look, General Agnew came to visit. We're just talking about the Nintendo Super Advantage.
Oh, this thing? Oh my gosh. The Super Advantage, it haunted my childhood. What a piece of crap the Super Advantage is. I mean, the controller is all whack. And the controls, they are terrible. I mean, look at the button layout. What kind of button layout is this? I mean, look at it. The buttons are all wrong. I mean, if you're going to have a button layout, you got to have it so it's all three in a row, so that you can play Street Fighter. What sort of crap is this? And the controller is inaccurate, and it pisses me off. I'm so pissed off right now, I don't even know what axis I'm using. I hate this thing so much. I hate you all. I hate you.
Alright, let's go ahead and move on.
Of course, as was the trend in the 90s, what Nintendo did, Sega had to try too.
Sega's arcade power stick was Sega's answer to the NES Advantage. While the controls are not arcade perfect, they are much closer to the real thing than either the NES or the Super Advantage. In the usual tradition of Sega products, the arcade power stick was targeted towards an older audience than Nintendo products. As a result, the joystick is larger and the buttons are very similar to the standard concave arcade buttons that all you arcade goers are used to. The arcade power stick features Mega Fire buttons and a sliding switch to control the speed of the Mega Fire action. Furthermore, the design of the arcade power stick is quite comfortable, with a built-in dip for your hand to rest in. My only real complaint with the arcade power stick is that there is only 3 buttons, making fighting a bit harder to play. However, if you are a Sega fan, this is a must-have joystick and is my preferred way of playing arcade classics on the Sega Genesis. So the question really is, which of these 3 arcade sticks is the best? The original NES Advantage, the very stylized Super Advantage, or Sega's arcade power stick? Well, we can already count out the Super Advantage because it honestly does nothing right. It offers no advantage whatsoever to a standard SNES controller. So the competition really comes down to the NES Advantage versus the Sega arcade power stick. Now, however much it pains me to say it, Sega wins on this one. The arcade power stick is far closer to the real thing than the NES Advantage. Not to mention that it's far more comfortable to play. Debatably, it looks better, but more importantly, it feels better. This thing feels comfortable both playing it on a table and resting in your lap. Now, if I could only figure out a way to hook this thing up to my Super Nintendo, we'd be in business. So, until next time, I'm Michael V, and this has been Arcade Guts.